Hello and welcome to the Engineer Your Success, Leadership, and Life Harmony Like a Mother show. I'm your host, Kenya Romanovska, award-winning investigative journalist turned maternity leave and working motherhood strategist. And we are here, STEM mom and corporate mom, to turn the motherhood penalty into your greatest advantage, right? Those psychological, emotional, physical changes that happen when you're a mom can hit you hard and affect everything in your life. And we want to give you the tools to succeed in every area of life. And today I'm so excited to have a first guest in a while. I've been doing the show solo for some time, but I met Reina a couple of weeks ago in a mastermind and we really hit it off. We had some great vibes. And today we are talking about her areas of expertise. I'll introduce her in a second, but I know that this might be interesting to you. I'm pulling from your bio. Reina has expertise in facilitating transformational results for women in healing love, leadership, feminine embodiment, wealth, and business. And her work encompasses inner child healing, nervous system regulation, emotional regulation, meditation, breath work, energy healing, chakra rebalancing, shadow work, relational healing, mindset, subconscious programming, and immersive practices. And her background is as an attorney. She's in London, so we're speaking across continents, which I love because my background's in Europe. So I always like connecting with people from the old continent. And we have wonderful questions for today. Actually, I have to pull them up. They are dedicated to a special someone. You know who you are, right? This podcast episode is for you. Reina, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know before we dive into our questions?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. I don't think there's anything more I can think of saying.
Okay, excellent. Shall we dive in?
Absolutely. I'm excited.
Okay, so we'll be covering healing. For context. Most of us want to achieve something great in life. We realize after a period of hustling that we have patterns that are holding us back. Small T traumas, big T traumas, things from our past experience that drive our software, right? And we need to up level. We need to shift that programming. We can't operate on Windows 3, right? We need to really rewire those neural pathways. So before I ask you the first question, I wanted to know what your company is called Empower Beyond Boundaries. Could you tell me about the root of that? What does that mean, beyond boundaries?
Oh, that's such an interesting, question. Empower Beyond Boundaries has a story behind it. And it is a very personal name to me in my journey. But I struggled with anxiety, with depression as a result of sort of childhood trauma and early onset trauma in my early 20s. And coming on to my mid 20s, I remember that I was in a space in my life where I was looking for a solution. I was looking for a resolution. And I knew that there there was an answer to everything that I was experiencing. And I knew that life was not meant to be lived through pain. That I
Mhm.
just knew that. It was an intuitive sort of feeling that I had. And one of the things that I remember I was doing at the time, and I was about 24, just coming on 25, was I was seeking a sort of quote unquote permanent solution to healing trauma, right? I was already working in the trauma field. And in a moment of me almost coming to end my life, I felt something hold me back. And in that moment, I heard the word beyond boundaries, right? And I knew that that was my chance at life again. That was my chance at giving back. That was my awakening of my purpose. And so, as a woman that truly values and truly lives, breathes, and speaks empowerment, I decided to name my company Empower Beyond Boundaries. For me, Beyond Boundaries is about stepping beyond your own limitations, opening your mind up, opening your consciousness, looking beyond everything that you've been taught, everything that you know is a norm, everything that you have experienced in your life, and saying, what is on the other side of this? Can I open my mind up? Can I be open to seeing beyond this? And there is no limitation to your boundaries, right? There is no limitation to it. So for me, when I think of Empower Beyond Boundaries, that is really you stepping into your own power. And that is the logo of my company is Empower Beyond Boundaries, step into your power. It is
Yeah.
really about that. It is really about embracing who you are, embracing your power, and really showing up in your life as the highest version of you through each stage in your journey, because the highest version of you through each stage is going to change, right?
Yes.
So that's a bit of the backstory and the journey of Empower Beyond Boundaries and how it came through.
Thank you for, I don't know if you saw my eyes getting teary, my nose getting a bit red. I had shivers. I think so many women who listen or work with me can relate to that. Being in the throes of such desperation and such sadness that you don't want to live anymore. I had a stage like that when I was younger, and I did a lot of digging. I come from an immigrant background, and there's tons of trauma in my ancestry and my DNA. So there's a period where I was wondering, like, what am I carrying that is not really mine, but it is actually trauma that my ancestors experienced? And like, where did this come from? I had such a good life, and where did this come from? Right. So I relate, I empathize. And I know that many women listening too are going through difficult stages. Like, you can get really big successes professionally, but and look like you're a high performer, and yet inside you're screaming and you feel literally like you're dying, right? So that was a very intimate share, and I appreciate you opening up to us. So the first question we have for you is, what does being healed look like?
Oh, wow. I think being healed is a feeling, right? But I will say this because I don't think many people talk about this. I think you will always have one foot in healing and one foot in growth, right? Because the two for me are one and the same. To be able to grow, you need to heal. To be able to expand, you need to heal. And it doesn't matter, where in that journey you are, there's always another layer and another depth. I think for me, when I can what I can truly describe, rather, healing feeling like, is an inner peace, an inner comfort, and a deep connection with yourself, right? Not compromising who you are anymore, not bending over back to please others, right? Not putting, or rather depleting your own cup, right, at the expense of filling other people's. I always talk about like this idea of having a cup overflowing, and I say that a mentor of mine, one of my first ever mentors, shared this with me, and it changed my life. And she said, "You know what, Reina, you have to fill your cup, and everything that's in the cup is for you to keep, right? It's in the abundance of what overflows is what you give to others." And I think that's really what healing is when you show up in your light. When you show up in your light, you're able to give others through your best, right? And it's a state of being rather than what it looks like, because I think it looks different for everyone, and I think that's so context specific or based on what you have been through in your journey. We've all been through different experiences of trauma in our childhood, right?
Mhm.
For me, trauma is not just a textbook definition of what it looks like. When I teach trauma, when I facilitate programs, I really open up the space and I open up horizon to look at trauma differently, because you have, macro and micro trauma, but at the same time, trauma is a feeling. It's something that is vested in you and it's sat in you, and it doesn't have to look like what is the textbook form of physical, emotional, sexual abuse and violence, right? Trauma can also be the unseen experiences that we have. It can be the vicarious experiences we have as well,
Yeah.
right? Seeing someone else go through something, or witnessing something, or watching something in our childhood on TV, right? How many of us? I grew up in the, like, in the era in the 90s when we had magazines, right? How many of us like read those magazines? And I remember, because I was like a Cosmo girl. But
Yeah.
how many times did we
I
read?
am 17.
Right. Yeah, 17, right? But how many times did we read that and we internalize things about our body, or things about being feminine, or things about what womanhood looks like? Those are facets and fragments and sprinkles of trauma that also vest and embed within us,
Yeah.
right? But we don't think of it that way, because the textbook definition is trauma is physical, sexual, financial, psychological, and emotional abuse. And for those of us that don't even feel like we fit into any of those categories, we feel like, okay, well, what am I healing? What does that look like for me?
Right.
I can see the symptoms of it, but I don't know what that looks like because I can't consciously pinpoint an experience in my life that fits into these categories.
Mm.
Make sense?
It does. It does. And I relate a lot to what you're saying as a feeling because I've been doing my own healing work. The
Yeah.
most important is probably throughout my journey as an entrepreneur, you're constantly confronted to your programming, your beliefs, and your limitations, all of that. So I would say with the process, the meditation that I've been learning recently, it's this feeling of feeling supported in my masculine
Mm.
and feminine energy.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
meditation has this visualization, and I find myself, the more I do it, the more I feel grounded in that. And the less I'm relying on narratives of the past, right? Or reacting to, I'm catching myself more and be like, this is a voice that's analyzing, reacting a situation of the past.
Mm.
And now I lean in less into that versus more, what am I creating? And then feeling supported, not looking at to other people or material things, but literally that sense of I feel supported by my kind of divine feminine and masculine, and
Yeah.
carrying that feeling in how I show up for my kids, the decisions I make in my business, versus before it was like this reactiveness, these patterns, right? Kind of whatever little traumas lived in me or
Yeah.
experiences is kind of being on edge, looking for danger or responding in this mechanism that you're catching yourself like, oh, where did that come from? Of course, like this past programming. So that's my experience, is at least some forms of healing. And as you said, there's always one foot in, like one foot and the growing and one foot in the healing. So it does resonate and make sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I'd say that it is a deep sense of grounding. It's a deep sense of presence. It's a deep sense of being in the now, right? Rather than living and responding and coming into life through a repetitive cycle or a past pattern. And I think the easiest way you can identify having healed something is experiencing the same situation on the outside but responding to it differently. You will see a stark difference in how you come into the same situation, whether that's in your relationship, whether that's in your business, whatever that looks like, whether that's in your career, in an everyday situation. You will respond to that same scenario, same situation differently, and it
Hmm.
will make you feel different as well.
Yes, makes sense completely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the next question would be, how do you stop putting yourself in a victim mindset because of past trauma and forgive and move on?
That's such a good question. How do you put yourself out of a victim mindset?
Yeah. How do you stop feeling like a victim because of past trauma, forgive and move on?
I think this question is about really just coming back to your own sense of power. This is what I say is, when we're born, we come into this world like a fresh canvas, okay? That we don't have any sort of conditioning, programming, there's nothing there, okay? And what happens is, over time, our sense of self is depleted through the experiences that we are having on the outside. And what that does is it makes us feel reliant on someone or something to make us feel a certain way. You think of it very, very sort of textbook standard biology. I know you've just had a baby, so
Yes. Yes.
right. But when your baby cries, it wants you to tend to her, right, or him, right? Your baby wants you to tend to her or him. But when that child is not receiving what it needs, right? It's going to start looking for it in other places. It's always going to look for that sense of comfort. But what that also does is, and this is something that I think we as a generation haven't learned, is how to tend to ourselves and how to rely on ourselves in a time when we can't receive that from other people because we're so used to it. It's human nature. That's how
Yeah.
we're born, that's how we're bred, right? Now, what happens is when we experience something in connection with someone, right? It almost kind of bonds us to, think of it like a thread, right? It bonds us to them and it says, for me to feel balanced, for me to feel good about myself, for me to feel grounded and in a state of peace, I need this person to validate. So it's like this constant cycle of like going through that person to validate, coming back. That's what when I think of quote unquote victim mindset, right? All it is it's a disconnect from your power. I think there's a mindset shift to happen here because when we see ourselves as a victim, we're kind of seeing ourselves in an authoritative dynamic, and that's a very like natural thing to do, especially with like a parent-child dynamic, right? Because that's how we've been taught to see parents is okay, this is authority and I'm here. Or even life in general. Look at how society is structured. There's always a pyramid structure, there's always authority,
Yeah.
right? But when we shift our mindset and we say, you know what, I'm not a victim, but I'm just disconnected from my own source of power because I have vested it through this thread into someone else. And all that's happening is my lifeline, my heartbeat, right, is being pumped through this person. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to disconnect, like physically take that plug out, and I'm going to start plugging it within myself to start charging my own power source to start charging me through me. And I think just doing that one thing is so powerful because you literally disconnect from seeking and almost like living life through a lifeline of someone else and
Mm,
bringing it back to you. And that's the ultimate shift for me when it comes to going from being connected in someone else's power to being connected in your own sense
mm,
of,
yeah.
right? And that is also going to shift how you see yourself because you're no longer going to see yourself as a victim. You're going to see yourself as someone that is in a state of healing, someone that is reconnecting with your power, learning what that feels like, learning what that looks like. And that's different for everyone. That's different for me. That's different for you. But that's a starting point that I can give you.
Yes. I relate. I resonate. And I think that's why I've tried so many healing modalities and why meditation. I guess I had to train myself through the others to arrive at meditation. But the idea of sitting
Yeah,
with myself, giving me that quiet, neutral space and love and being with myself when, let's say, whatever past situations. And it's funny because now I have a hard time even remembering those traumatic situations because I feel like I have done some of the healing. And there was this period where I felt still so attached that I'm like, go away, go away, go away. And
yeah,
at some point it kind of lifted. And I realized, wow, it's been a while since I haven't let that situation dictate my thoughts for, it's
yeah,
been some time. So
yeah,
the meditation process, now I resisted it for such a long time. And
yeah.
now I see how that's a way to connect with your powers. Simply, you are with yourself, you make that time for yourself, and you can reconnect with that power. Whereas instead of being constantly in interaction with others or fulfilling somebody else's
Mhm.
needs or external expectations, right?
Yeah,
So that's how I interpreted your answer in my
yeah.
scenario.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you bring up meditation because meditation is one of the first things that I teach as well. Right. It is everything when it comes to healing journey. I can't emphasize it enough. Meditation has changed my life, not just in terms of healing, in terms of my business, my success, but especially in terms of how I feel, how I regulate. I was someone that woke up every day, I had anxiety throughout the day. And it's very rare for me to feel anxious. And when
Yeah.
I do, I know it's something. It's not just because that's my state of being and that's how I live and wake up feeling every day. So I know that a lot of your listeners are sort of working moms. I know that a lot of them are sort of in the corporate space, and meditation is going to change your life. And
Mhm.
this is not guided meditation. I wouldn't advocate for guided meditation. I never have. It has its benefits in its own way. But this is really meditation where you are learning to sit in silence and actually listening to your thought process, right? Actually being with yourself and starting to understand yourself, because that's, I think, something we don't do enough is understand ourselves. And you'll have this where you'll start sitting in meditation and you'll judge your thoughts. Like,
Yes.
why am I thinking that? Why am I thinking that? Why is that coming up for me? This happened 10 years ago with a friend. Why is that coming up for me? Just let it come through. But I know that, and we've spoken about this as well. Meditation has helped you immensely. It has changed my life, and I can't. If you're listening and you want to start working on your healing, or you're in a healing process and journey, and you want to enhance that, do this for 3 weeks, because this is what works with my clients. Start meditating every day for 3 weeks, and come back. Come back and see the difference that it makes in your life. 3 weeks
Yes.
is all it takes. 21 days of consistent meditation, and things start shifting.
Yeah, I agree. And for some, that just like for me, that journey might take a year, where maybe you want to do different things. I did IFS, EMDR, tapping.
Mhm,
All of
mhm.
these are helpful modalities, and that's where I had to go through to journey to finally be like, I want to make meditation a priority. And I'm a mom of three. I have a business. I have three kids, and I will be honest that there's days where I did and I would fall asleep, but I would always, or I would like
Yeah,
I would, or on days where, it's felt busy, I would still work on putting myself in that state. And I started with a guided meditation, as I was told, like as training wheels. So you started and then you, let's say, wean yourself. And that's essentially
yeah,
what I did. And I would still make moments to get myself into that state of support, of grounding, and kind of observing my thoughts. So don't give up just because you think you have to do it perfectly, right? Or that you have to absolutely every single day be perfectly consistent and do the whole thing.
yeah,
I decided to make it a priority for a couple of reasons. The way I wanted to show up for my kids, the mornings and afternoons can be really hectic. And so you can be in that reactive state really fast. And I wanted
yeah,
to just take a step back and be more neutral with my kids. So that was one of the primary things. And also in how I showed up with my clients and business situations. We take a lot of risks as entrepreneurs, and at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. You're the one who has to follow through. And so without that neutral sense of calm, it's easy to get sucked into panic, and then everything spirals, right? So I wanted that
yeah,
grounding. Those are only two examples. There's more, but those
yeah,
that's what I decided to
100%.
do.
And you know what, Kenya, you only need 10 minutes a day. If you don't have, you know, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, start with five, start with 10,
Yeah.
build it up. I think a lot of times people get um, disheartened to meditate because they feel like, I have to spend an hour of my time doing this. I have to spend half an hour. When things are busy, when you're having a day and a half, right? Just 5, 10 minutes. Start with that. Put a timer on your phone.
Yes.
Everyone has 5 minutes.
Yes.
Everyone has 10 minutes, and if you don't, then we gotta make that time, right? But just start with that. And even myself, I've meditated for years. Most of the time, it's a 20-minute meditation at the most. It's a 15-minute meditation on a regular, right? It doesn't need to take so much of your day up, right? It needs to just be a proportion, but that 15 to 20 minutes is going to make a vast difference in everything, in how your day goes. And the other thing I'll say is, you don't have to meditate in the morning. Something client says, Raina, I don't have time in the morning. I'm rushing. I'm doing this for the kids. I'm like, it doesn't have to be a designated time in the morning, right? It doesn't have to be in the evening. It can be any time of the day. You got
Yes.
to find what works for you. Years ago, I used to meditate in the morning. Now I meditate in the morning first thing. I fall asleep, right? So I switched it up. I changed it up. I meditate in the middle of the day. Sometimes I meditate around sunset time. That's like a good time for me to meditate. So life is not just black and white. You got to play around with it. Things change. You change, and you know, 10 minutes, start with that. Start with that.
Yeah. And some of you might be wondering, when I was working on my vision board for meditating every day, I also put I need a sleep plan, because at some point my baby was waking up every hour. So I decided to invest in myself, think that leap to learn it, wanting to be that meditative person in life. I invested both in a mentor to help me learn to meditate and in a sleep consultant. I made the investments the same day. I know that many of my listeners struggle with, and I also hired a housekeeper. So like I made three investments in a very short period of time because they were scaffolded. Now, I mean, I didn't start off like that in business.
Yeah.
It took me a couple of years, but so many women listening to this might maybe have invested in a housekeeper, but so many women feel the guilt of getting that help. And we've talked about that when I showed up with you, but it starts with having enough love for yourself and seeing your value. Anyway, I know I have a few more questions, so I don't want to get too sidetracked. Comparison. So I have questions about feelings of comparison regarding trauma, and feeling guilty working through your trauma. What to do if you seem stuck in cycles of trauma responses and relationships due to both of your pasts? Like, how do you prevent passing on learned behaviors and underlying beliefs to your kids? How do you catch yourself and reframe during moments of high pressure, right? In 2020, you can be like, oh, I should have done this, and where have you found the most meaningful successes in healing? So if we can weave in those
Sure.
questions, that's what I have on the roster for that. So,
What's the best one? Is regarding comparison, right?
yeah.
And
But
what's
so
that?
many
Is that
people had it worse. What I went through wasn't so bad, and feeling guilty or
mm,
addressing things in your past as traumatic,
this,
you just dismiss them instead of working through them, right? Like, bah, not that
this,
big a
this,
deal.
this? Yeah, I hear you. And you know what? There are always going to be people out there that tell you that, you know what, it's not as bad for you as it is for others. Be grateful for what you have. And I am just not a fan of that, because you know what that does? It bypasses your spiritual journey and your growth. Okay. And I think the best thing that you can do to stop comparing to other people is to start practicing self-compassion,
Mm.
right? Because a lot of times we don't have compassion for ourselves because we have been taught to give and overgive, especially as women, and what I call be self-sacrificial women, right? Be the woman that sacrifices all your needs for other people, because that's the good woman. That's the definition. That's the highest definition of a good woman, quote unquote, right? But that sort of quote unquote good woman um persona that we have been taught to embody, we need to start shifting that. And a lot of times that comes from starting to hold compassion for yourself, for your experiences, because when we say, you know what, I I experienced this and it was painful. And I'm gonna now just hold the space for myself to move through whatever is coming through, to feel the feels, to feel the emotions. And yes, it's not always nice. It's icky, it's painful. You cry, you feel the ache in your heart. I know, believe me, right? Um, that's that's the onset of your healing, right? That's the onset of just coming into yourself and seeing you walk literally towards your healed self, right? That's step I say step two because step one for me is always awareness, but step two is really that holding that space, and that's when you really start seeing that shift happen. So I would say practice self-compassion. I journal every day. If you journal, then please come and write in your journal, what are things you're holding space for today, right? How are you holding space for yourself? How are you appreciating yourself? How are you appreciating your journey? And yes, we get to be grateful for our lives because, yes, we are blessed in so many ways. I always say if you squint, you'll see the blessings, even if you're going through a hard time. But that doesn't mean that we get to um, sit there and, you know, almost dismiss our own journey, right? Because what that does is it makes you disconnected from giving yourself what you need. So that's number one when it comes to that comparison is practice self-compassion. Start small and it will grow, and you will learn how to hold more and more space for yourself, because what I've noticed from my journey is the more success that I've achieved in my life, the more my business has grown, the more healing that I have had to do, and the depth that I've had to go into is more. But because you peel through the layers and you move through them, it becomes easier to hold space for yourself through the more painful things, right? So it's the same in your own journeys. I think the more we heal, the more your soul says it's time, it's space to go deeper, right? and you can do it because you've healed the surface level. We're going deeper and deeper, and that's the journey of life, you know. But yeah, now I've lost my chain of thought of the other questions you have to remind me.
We were talking about comparison, so you answered it perfectly.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that was a very comprehensive response to that question. The next one was regarding trauma responses in relationships.
Yeah.
If you seem to be stuck in a cycle, you're arguing, you're not hearing each other due to both of your respective pasts,
Mm-hmm.
what to do?
Okay, that's interesting. Um, if it's just regarding communication, I think that we have to come and look at how you learn to communicate in your childhood. Okay, there's two things that's happening here, and everything relational. We want to bring it back to doing healing work around your mother and father wounds. Okay, because those are the two primary relational experiences we have in our childhood. Okay, we learn to relate to the mother figure, we learn to relate to the father figure, and where those bonds are not, I don't like to use the word healthy, but where those bonds are not intact in the way that they should have been made intact in our childhood, it reflects in our adult relationships. It's not a good or bad thing. Okay, it's that's neutral. We want to see everything as neutral, but all that's doing is that's reflecting to you where your own growth needs to take place. Okay, so if it's a communication thing, I would say come and look at, where is this stemming from, right? Why are you having a difficulty in communicating? Maybe you're not able to say what you feel because you feel blocked. Maybe you feel like if you say this, they're going to leave you. Maybe you feel like there's a fear of feeling rejected, a fear of feeling abandoned if you actually show up and speak your truth in your relationship. I think what I will say is that when I see relationships as a pod, okay? And it's an energetic pod where two people come to co create something new. And that's not to say that, or rather, that's to say that we get to create the kind of relationship that we want to create, but it takes two. It takes holding space, it takes compassion, it takes understanding of each other. And it's very easy when we're going through the motions, the feels, to project. Okay. The best advice I can give is to just pause and reflect instead of projecting.
Yes,
See,
yes.
okay, how am I showing up in this relationship? What can I shift? I truly believe in the law of attraction. I truly believe in the law of vibration, that how you show up is what is going to be reflected to you. Now, if we, and I'll say this because I feel like someone needs to hear this. That's probably why I need to say it. But if we have perceptions about men that are, men don't listen, men are sloppy, men, men never understand women, men don't do this, men don't, well, that's how your man's going to show up, because subconsciously that's the vibration and the vibrational communication that is happening, right? Your energy speaks 2 steps ahead of you. Think before you even speak, your energy speaks 2 steps ahead of you, right? So what you want to do is you want to start coming back and reflecting. I know it's hard because no one wants to be like, oh my God, yeah, no, like, I have a part to play in this as well. That's the hardest thing we can do. But radical honesty in divine, the most abundant connections and relationships is needed. And for most of us, we have to come back and say, how am I showing up? What is my perception about men? What is my perception about relationships? How can I start to shift that? Because trust me, when you start shifting how you see men, how you see relationships, your stories, your mindset, your perceptions about them all, he will also start showing up differently.
Yes, I completely agree. And you and I are in the same space. And since I've started doing this work, who gets flowers every week now?
Ah, lovely, right?
And I mean, we already had a good baseline with my partner, right? But I'm noticing he's showing up differently. I have to share an anecdote. It's so cute. So I met my husband at a Polish studies conference years ago, like almost 2 decades ago. It's kind
Yeah.
of scary to say that. And it was an instant crush. We had to go through quite a few years and phases until he like we came together ultimately. I lived in a different city. And after this conference, I wrote a letter to him, paper letter. And we kept on corresponding, but I didn't get a paper version back. So I teased him always, I would love to get a paper version in the mail. Guess what this girl got in the mail for her birthday this week?
I love that. it's true. It's how we show up. And let me say this as well, okay? Because as women, we don't do this enough, is we don't ask to receive.
Yeah,
If
it's
you don't ask, and I don't mean verbally, okay? I don't mean verbally like pester,
mhm,
chase, run after your man, your husband, your boyfriend. I mean energetically, okay? If you don't put what you want out there in your relationship, universe is not gonna reciprocate that back. you know Literally just sit down today, get your journal out, and write down what you actually want in your relationship, what you actually want in your marriage, and what is your highest desire for that pod. Okay, that's how you want to see the relationship as a pod, right? Think of a flower just blooming in a space. Eventually it's just going to bud, right? It sits there, but eventually it's going to bud. What are you feeding that? That's how the best way you want to see it is, what are you feeding that? Don't worry about your partner. They will come through. It is the law of attraction, and if they don't come through, then that's your journey. We have to go through that too, but one goes up, the other follows.
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know
Yeah, I don't think I tease him from time to time. I haven't pestered recently as much as I can. Yeah, I generally aim not to pester, right? And kind of insert humor, but it's been fun to share that. I think if we go to the next question, how can I prevent passing on my learned behaviors and underlying beliefs to my kids? And if you don't mind me sharing what I've observed, I think starting your own healing journey. And two, practicing being in that space of neutrality. If you don't want to pass on patterns, then are you able to train yourself to take a step back and not just react and replay
yeah,
those scenarios, but actually understand yourself, observe yourself, know yourself more deeply? And
yeah,
I think we are all going to do things with our kids that in hindsight we're going to regret. We are not robots, we're humans, and one day our kids will look back and it's the stupidest thing that they will remember that we thought was completely irrelevant. I think about the things that have made a huge imprint on my wealth set point. It is the silliest things that there was, I'm sure, no ill intention at all, but that's what stayed stuck in my memory, right? So we can't expect
Mhm.
ourselves to perfectly show up. Our kids are going to have their own spiritual journeys too. But I would say being in that place of neutrality, developing that skill can go a long way in breaking generational patterns. I'm sure you have lots to add to that. I think that's just the
Yeah.
beginning.
No, and I think it's such a important thing that you mentioned here, because I think we have so much pressure as it is to be perfect women, perfect business women, perfect entrepreneurs, and the perfection of motherhood syndrome, right, is a thing. And we feel so guilty just um going through our own human journey, going through our own healing journey, and being so afraid not to affect your children through your own experiences. Let me tell you something. The fact that you are even thinking that tells me that you're doing great. You're doing great. That's a starting point,
Yeah.
right? Because you're already conscious of your behaviors, of your emotions, how you're responding, how you're reacting. That's number one. So give yourself some grace for that and celebrate that in itself. But I think the second thing I would say is to know that, like you said, Kenya, everyone is on a spiritual journey, and the best thing that you can do to not pass on the generational wounding is to focus on your own healing, to focus on your own practice, to focus on your own journey, because as you focus on yours, your children are going to absorb more of that energy and the vibration that you are showing up in, rather than trying to focus on how am I not projecting on my children, right? Because then you are almost projecting on your children. The focus has to come, and this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning about self-power, right? It has to come back to your own source, to your own sense of self-power, to say, I'm going to show up as the highest version of myself, and I'm going to be the best me, because the best you, guess what, is already the best mother, right? And I believe that every soul chooses its parent, right? Whether you've had an amazing experience, a dysfunctional experience, whether you've had, you know, the best relationships with your parents, the worst relationships with your parents, whatever it is, there is a soul connection there. And your child being in your life has chosen you. And that just feel into that for a minute. There's a reason they've chosen you, right? That's powerful. That's divine. Yeah.
Your testimony.
Right. I'm not a mom, but I truly believe that, when I am, my children will choose me, not for anything, but because their soul connects with my journey, right? So you're going through your own journey, you focus on your own journey and show up in the highest, best version of you, and know that that's enough, right? That's good enough. Not just enough, that's good enough, that's more than enough. And how you choose and how you respond to situations will change. But say you responded to a situation in a way you didn't want to. That's okay. Hold grace for yourself. But you know what? Your child had to learn that too, right? Your child had to learn that too.
Yeah. And that I think that same answer can tie into I think that probably will be the last question before we talk about your upcoming retreat and then any offers you have that we want our listeners to know about. But how do I catch myself and reframe during moments of high pressure? Hindsight is always 2020. However, when you're going through tough situations, it's hard to act or communicate in a healed way. So that neutrality, the practice of meditation can hone that skill. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think I'll share from my own personal journey. Is this someone speaking that is an entrepreneur? I'm assuming you are. Um,
Not in this case, no. So
okay.
they have bosses.
Okay. Whatever journey you're going through, I'm going to speak from my own experience. Okay. I always say the pendulum swings left, the pendulum swings right, right? Because at the end of the day, whatever you experience that is your most difficult, know that the only way from there is to go right. Yeah.
Mm.
You have to experience emotions in that. And what we do is when we're in a difficult situation, we don't want to be there because it's painful, it's icky. There's this stress, there's anxiety, there's a lot that comes with it. But the quickest way for you to shift what you're going through is to just become present in that and feel it, as painful as it is, as stressful as it is that you're going through. The journey becomes easier when you accept it, when you learn what you're meant to learn, and start seeing where the growth is in that space. Okay, because then you shift the vibration of where you are to where you want to go. Yeah. The difficult thing we do is we stay there longer than is needed because we don't want to be there. Right. Rather than saying, you know what, I'm here, it's rock bottom for me, it doesn't get any worse than this, but it is where I am. Yeah. I've been in situations where I had zero money and I was like, this is rock bottom. This is really rock bottom. But the easiest way for me to get out of rock bottom is to accept this is where I am and actually see where is the growth in this. Because you know what? I need to feel this to feel that. Yeah. I need to feel this to be grateful for that when it
Mm.
comes. So you have to just be there, be present, meditate is number one. Meditate, focus on where you want to go. I would suggest vision boards. And also, I would suggest sitting in a visualization meditation every day helps a lot. Okay, if you don't know what a visualization meditation is, then just quickly, you'll sit in meditation, but instead of quieting your thought process, you're starting to focus on literally creating the visual images of your desires. If you have a vision board, you can do the vision board, but a visualization meditation will help you immensely through whatever it is that you're going through.
Yes. Yes to all of that. I mean, these are techniques I use. And yes, I was in a situation where I had $0 at some point in my business. And
I
personally,
think we all have been, Kenya. That's it. I think every entrepreneur, every
yeah,
successful woman
yeah,
has to feel that. You have
yeah,
to feel that. And yes, it sucks when you're there. I believe me, I know it. It feels like the world is ending and crumbling and nothing is gonna get better, but it does. And it does when you start changing where you're focusing rather than focusing on I'm here and it sucks. Just say, yeah, I'm here and it sucks and okay. I don't have anything right now, my relationship's crumbling, my business is crumbling, but what do I have?
yeah.
Right? What do I have?
Yes. And I remember exactly where I was sitting on the staircase. I was voice messaging with somebody that I trusted, who's also a mentor. And she said, say to yourself, this is going to make me, it's not going to break me. This is going to make me, it's not going to break me. And that was a huge reframe. And, now when I go through challenging situations, I'm like, I had $0. And then within a few months, I made back,
Yeah.
almost 5 figures. Like I woke up and I knew, and, so now I do have this sense, you have to take bigger risks. Like when you hire in your business, that's a
Yeah.
huge financial risk. It's a huge cost. You're taking a chance on people, and employees often have more rights than employers, right? So like you're really putting a lot of trust in people. When you're a small company, it's huge. So, but now I have that memory of being able to overcome that, and I can face situations with
Yeah.
more calm. Like right now I've pushed myself to really grow, and I'm like, things are going fast, and there's this, and I'm going here and there and there. And there's a tendency to use the O word, which I'm not even going to say, right? It starts with O, it ends with M. And I'm like, I will not speak that into existence. I'm speaking that I'm sitting with this, I'm supported, I'm showing up one foot in front of the other. I have a baby, I'm doing fantastic. Like when I started out. So that's different, right? I don't know if it's in closing thoughts. When you
Yeah.
start talking to clients, we have a tendency to focus on the past a lot. Like this happened, this happened, this happened. And then when you can shift away from talking about the past to being in the present and being in your creative desires, the game starts being really exciting, right? Any
It does.
closing thoughts on that? And then tell us about the retreat coming up in Kenya, because
Oh my goodness. I'm super excited. So this is a women's leadership retreat happening in Kenya. It is a 7-day retreat experience. I'm going to be facilitating it. It is in a very prominent, energetic hub at what is called the Lumo Conservancy. I specifically chose that. I'm from Kenya. I was born there. I grew up there. I moved to England when I was 9 years old. So it's a very special place for me, because it's around where I've grown up. It's around, my childhood memories. So it's going back full circle for me as well. But essentially, it's a 7-day retreat experience. We're going through mind, body, soul work. This is really for the woman that is there to create legacy and impact through your work. Whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are a woman in a leadership position, a CEO, an executive, this is really the growth space for you to come and do healing work, to come and shift your mindset work, to come and elevate, and to reconnect with your legacy, your impact, and your purpose. Because I wanna leave this world with something behind, right? Something to be remembered for, lives to be impacted, and I want to leave behind a lot of my work for people to carry on doing it. So whatever space you're in, if that resonates with you, then that's happening this October 2024. So reach out to me, and I'm already looking for dates for next year. So if you are interested, then we are possibly going to have more dates next year. If you can't make it this year and you want to reserve a space, then that's coming through as well.
that's great to know. I have people, I'm thinking about one more person who looks for opportunities like that, because I've had a few in mind. I'm looking at the website right now. So for those of you listening, empoweredbeyondboundaries.com. You can see it on the ticker /warrior women retreat. Empoweredbeyondboundaries.com /warrior women retreat. This looks so lovely. This looks so lovely. I think I've read a book this could be a conversation for another time, but I think I've read a book about journeys similar to yours in terms of, and one of my closest mentors, she's in her 80s now. She was born in Tanganyika. So I think it might have been partly Kenya and Tanzania. I don't, if I messed up the geography, I'm really sorry. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, she was born in a gulag and then spent about 10 years, more or less, of her childhood there in
Amazing.
Tanganyika, right?
Amazing.
So it's pretty, the picture she shared, the journey she shared, it makes for quite the memories of childhood to,
Yeah.
when I'm in cold Canada here. And I think growing up she's like, oh yeah, I woke up one day and there was a huge, was it a python or a boa in my, beautiful little house. I'm like, oh yeah, that's
Absolutely, absolutely. You know what? I have fond memories of my childhood, but you know what I always say is I think my life journey is one where you would think the odds are always stacked against you. You know, I always say I'm a girl from Africa who was doing big things. Who would think that, right? My life brought me to England, and I was given so much opportunity, so many doors opened for me. But if you step into your possibility and you look at your own life journey, there is so much there for you to give back, so many big things for you to do. And I truly believe in being a facilitator for women that are so ready to step into that work, you know. And a lot of it is moving through that healing work, moving through what we've been through.
Yeah, absolutely. Reina, thank you so much for, I don't know if you want to talk about anything else or leave people on that magic, because people can find your mastermind and other offerings on empoweredbeyondboundaries.com. Would you like to say anything else?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they can find me on my podcast. They can connect with me on Facebook. You can, reach me on empowerbeyondboundaries.com. There's a contact page there if you want to reach me directly and drop me an email. So there's lots of different ways to connect with me. I would say the quickest and easiest way is Facebook DM me. I'm always there. I'll respond straight away. And if you are interested in learning more about trauma healing work, this is what I talk about on my podcast as well. So you're more than welcome to join in.
Awesome. This was such a nourishing conversation. It's helping me celebrate how far I've come on my own journey and everything ahead. Because as you said, it's a journey. It's not a one time I'm healed forever. You will encounter experiences and you are going to have to heal in different ways and hold space for that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's never linear. It's always up and down.
Yeah.
You know?
Love it. Okay. Thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the word, Reina's work, and this community. And Reina, I will see you backstage. We are ending the live.
Thank you so much for listening in. Thank you so much, Kenya.